All right. We ready? Yeah. Amazing. Amazing. Love it. Okay, here we go. Hi at home, everyone. Trying to get everyone rounded up here. Good Shabbos, everyone. Shabbat Shalom. Here we go. Good to see everyone so alive this morning. A lot of energy today.
We're waiting for the lunar.
Oh, yeah. Is that tonight or today?
Monday.
Monday, okay.
I actually have a friend who went up to Austin.
I went to the last one in South Carolina.
Oh, you were? That was 17.
Yeah. Richard Fain brought me on his jet, and we went to watch it, and I saw it.
We're excited because UConn is in the Final Four.
If UConn wins, I win the pool, the Betham pool. So, okay. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat le'daratam berit olam. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat le'daratam berit olam. Bein uven b'nei Yisrael oti le'olam oti le'olam. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat le'daratam berit olam. Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai es ha-shamayim ve'et ha'aretz v'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat le'daratam berit olam. Uvayom hashvi shavat vaynafash shavat vaynafash shavat vaynafash v'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat le'daratam berit olam. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Amen. L'chaim.
What?
Okay.
The grapes of wrath.
Blessing for the study of Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kishana b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen. Okay. Torah portion is called Shmini. You know the word Shmini probably from the word Shmona. Echad, Shtayim, Shalosh, Arba, Chamesh, Shesh, Sheva, Shmona. 8 means 8. And Shmini means the 8th. And the Torah portion starts out, it was on the 8th day. Now, if you've looked closely at Talmud, there's this idea that whenever a Torah portion starts off, or a section of the Tanakh starts off, Vayehi, and it means something bad is about to happen. Vayehi bimei Achashverosh, and it was in the days of Achashverosh. Right? Vayehi bayom hashmini, and it was on the 8th day. And so that's a clue that something not good is about to happen. And as we'll see, I talked about it last night a fair bit, This is the Torah portion where Aaron's two sons die in a very terrible way, which we'll see in a moment. So something bad is about to happen. Before we get to that, though, it says, and it was on the 8th day, and then once we say it was on the 8th day, we go into what's about to happen. But a good question then is, the 8th day of what? What is it the 8th day of? So going back to last week's Torah portion, at the end of Tzav, last week's portion, so, I was out of town last week. So, you probably don't have like a good understanding of last week's Torah portion. No, I'm just okay. No, I'm just kidding. Who was here? Rabbi
Greengrass.
Oh, all right. You're in good shape then. Not only that, Rabbi Greengrass is going to Israel tonight. So, we went on that mission, Rabbi Kleppy and I, and Nora and Tamara, Sharon, and Rabbi Greengrass couldn't go to volunteer with us for 4 days because she had a commitment here. So she's going tonight on her own to go volunteer for 4 days, which is, I think, very, very cool. Okay, so in the last week's... Does that make number 8 a bad number? No. On the contrary. Let me explain why. Because the 8th day was, at the end of last week's Torah portion, it took 7 days for the what we call the Miluim, which was the inauguration of the priests. According to what God told Moses, here's what you need to do for 7 days, and then the 8th day. Now, why is it a good number? 8's good, right? It's when we have the bris. It's the days of Hanukkah. I mean, these are good things, unless you're the baby. Then, it's not exciting. Okay. No, it's good. It's good. These are good things. But the idea of 8 is 7 is how long it took to create the world. And so 7, creation of the world is physical. And so 8, so those 7 days are even though the 7th day was Shabbat, and but things were created, like rest was created. The concept of rest was created on the 7th day. But 8 is so whereas 7 is physical, 8 is considered more spiritual. And that's why the 8th day is the end of the creation of the tabernacle, because the tabernacle was about using the altar and the Holy of Holies to ascend the materialistic and to go into the spiritual. And so it's the 8th day. It's beyond the 7 days of creation. So I think that's the idea. In any event, now that you're... Yes? 8th day of what? What is it? Nisan. 8th day Nisan. They're going to inaugurate the tabernacle, which means that for the first time, Aaron's been told all this time, you're going to get to be the high priest, and your sons are going to come after you, are going to get to be the priests. So a good question would be, well, what does that mean? Well, once we inaugurate this thing, then you guys are going to go to work. So now, finally, they're building this thing, and the priests are going to get to run it. So let me just give a little bit of a background. What is this thing that they're building? They're building the prototype of what will be the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, right? The Beit HaMikdash, the Western Wall surrounds the Holy Temple. So when they get to Jerusalem, they're going to have a Holy Temple. But this is going to be the prototype of what the temple is going to be for while they're wandering around in the wilderness. And it basically a big tent, and inside the tent there's another tent, and inside that tent there's the Ark of the Covenant, and inside that is the 10 Commandments, and that's where Moses would go to talk to God. And then right outside of that there was an altar, and that's where the priests would offer the sacrifices, which is essentially what would happen when they built the permanent temple in Jerusalem. Okay, so now that you have this thing, Aaron is rewarded. Does anyone remember why Aaron was rewarded to be the priest? What he did to earn being the priest?
He built a golden calf.
We're going to get to that. But that's not what he did to earn this.
But he had
Okay.
spoke for Moses.
Exactly. Good. So when God came to Moses and said, you're going to be the ones to lead the people out of Israel, Aaron didn't say, hey, I'm the older brother, and I'm a prophet too. Why are you picking my younger brother to do this? Instead, what Aaron said was, not only is it good that you pick Moses, but I will be Moses' assistant. And I'll speak for him, because Moses had a terrible speech impediment. No one can understand a word that he was saying. I'll translate for him. And because he humbled himself, God said, you're going to be rewarded. Your reward's going to be that you're the high priest, and all the priests are going to come from you. What's priest in Hebrew? Kohen. So, any Kohens here? Yeah? Okay. Well, usually anyone whose last name that is Cohen is a Kohen. And if your last name is Levi, and anything like it, Cohen, Khan, Kahan, whatever, Levi, Leibowitz, Levitt, Levkov, anything like that, generally you come from that same line. Okay, so now that we know what's going to happen, we finally get to this great moment where Aaron's sons are going to come in, and they're going to...
Light my fire.
Very nice. Jim Morrison here. You're on a roll today. They're going to come in, and it's this great moment, and Aaron's so excited. He's been waiting all this time, and his family is going to be the priests, and it doesn't turn out well. Okay, so let's get into it. Chapter 9 of Leviticus, which is the beginning of Shmini. Shmini, by the way, is famous. We're not doing it today because it's later in the Torah portion. It's famous for the laws of keeping kosher. What you're allowed to eat, what you're not allowed to eat, all that comes at the end of the portion. We won't get to that for another 2 years because we're triennial. So, okay, here we go. Chapter 9, verse 1, Norman, please.
On the 8th day, Moses called Aaron and his sons and the elders of Israel. He said to Aaron, take a calf from the herd for a purgation offering and a ram for a burnt offering without blemish, and bring them before the Eternal. And
okay, so this is one of those moments where really you have to have the Hebrew word. Otherwise, you miss what's going on. So if you look at verse 2, as we're inaugurating now the 8th day, Moses says to his brother Aaron, take a calf, a young male of the cattle for a sin offering, and a ram for an olah offering unblemished, and offer them before God. And to the children of Israel speak as follows, take a he-goat. So I want to point out here that there are 3 animals that are being taken. Clear so far? Okay. Now, honestly, we could spend hours just on these couple of verses. It is so deep what's going on here. There's a lot of stuff going on here. In fact, I often find that Parshat Shmini, there's more to talk about than almost any Torah portion, which is rare for Leviticus, because usually Leviticus is like, but this is incredible. So, first animal that he's taking is a calf. What do we know about Aaron and calves? The golden calf. So the golden calf is in Hebrew Egel HaZahav, right? That was the idol that they made when Moses went up the mountain to worship God, to get the Torah, and everyone else, except for the Levites and the women, thought that he was dead. And they go to Aaron and they force him to make them an idol. And Aaron takes all of this gold and he throws it into the fire. And according to the Torah, out pops, because there was someone there who did witchcraft, but that's a whole different class, out pops a golden calf. And then the people start worshiping it. God says to Moses, look what they're doing. Moses comes down, breaks the tablets, smashes it, and it's a bad scene. Okay. But Aaron is connected to this. He's the one who threw the gold into the fire. And now the very first thing that Aaron's supposed to do, now that they're inaugurating this holy temple, traveling holy temple, is bring a calf. That's weird. But why? For a sin offering. So, maybe he has some expiation to do. Good, exactly. Okay, now what's the next one? A ram. Let's skip the ram for a second and go to verse 3. And to the children of Israel, Ve'el b'nei Yisrael tidaber lemor, say, speak to them saying, Chu seir izim. Take a he-goat. Now, this one is to make expiation, not for Aaron, but for all b'nei Yisrael, with a goat. So if Aaron was connected to the calf, why are the children of Israel connected to a goat? This is a story you know. But that's actually a very interesting idea. Yeah, it's an interesting idea. But even back further. So there was this guy named Joseph. And the brothers threw him into a pit. And then they took a goat. And they took the blood and they dipped his coat in the blood of the goat. This is for expiation of what the rest of the tribes did to Joseph. Isn't that unbelievable? Okay, so what do we have? First he takes the egel, expiation for the golden calf. Then we take the ez, the goat, for expiation for how the brothers sold Joseph into slavery. But now let's go back to the ram. So if you look, take yourself a calf, a young male of cattle for a sin offering, and a ram. And this is for how poorly the Los Angeles Rams were... No, all right. If you had money on them. Okay. All right. The ram... Say it again?
It's a substitute for Isaac.
Fantastic. Very good. So Abraham was going to sacrifice Isaac, which, you shouldn't do. Right? You shouldn't kill your kids. And so, even though God told him to do it, and even though he never actually did it, and we don't, this isn't I personally don't think Abraham was ever going to do it, because the Torah says, we're going up and we're coming back. He says, we're coming back, we'll be right back, he says but anyway, whatever. We fight over that every third year when we get to that Torah portion. Either way, we see that the ram replaces Isaac, and that there almost was a father killing his son as an offering to God. So I don't think that we need to make expiation for that, but it's very interesting considering what's about to happen. We don't kill sons on the altar, but 2 sons are about to die on the altar. Isn't this incredible? Okay, so let's keep going and see what happens. So keep that in mind, that the ram could be expiation for what Abraham was going to do for Isaac, even though Abraham never did it. And we don't do that. And God says you don't do that. But then God does that. What do I mean by that? All right, so let's watch. Okay, so now we're up to verse 4. Norman.
And an ox and a ram for an offering of well-being to sacrifice before the Eternal, and a meal offering with oil mixed in. For today the Eternal will appear to you. They brought to the front of the tent of meeting the things that Moses had commanded, and the community leadership came forward and stood before the Eternal. Moses said, "This is what the Eternal has commanded that you do, that the presence of the Eternal may appear to you." Then Moses said to Aaron, "Come forward to the altar and sacrifice your purgation offering and your burnt offering, making expiation for yourself and for the people. And sacrifice the people's offering and make expiation for them, as the Eternal has commanded." Aaron came forward to the altar and slaughtered his calf for purgation offering. Aaron's sons brought the blood to him. He dipped his finger in the blood and put it on the horns of the altar, and he poured out the rest of the blood at the base of the altar. The fat, the kidneys, and the protuberance of the liver from the purgation offering he turned into smoke on the altar as the Eternal had commanded Moses. And the flesh and the skin were consumed in fire outside the camp.
Okay, so, there's so much to talk about here. Is usually on these days, I have like a treat for a couple of you. Usually on these days when we have the conservative minyan after, very few people come to the conservative minyan and this. I mean, Abe and the Ben Eunices do, but that's about it. I don't know, maybe a couple more. There are a couple more. Carol, I don't know who else. Whatever, it doesn't matter. But because I love it, because whatever I do in this class, I just use for my sermon over there. Kill two birds with one stone. But there's so much going on in Shmini, I actually have something else for them over there. Plus, I had a sermon, a different one last night and a different one for the border. You could have gotten a lot of Shmini if you wanted, and but it's nice to kill two birds with one stone. I don't know why I brought that up. But well, I got to fill an hour. Will you come back with me now just to verse 6 and 7? The rabbis make a big deal out of verse 6 and 7. Now, actually, maybe even go back to verse 5. So we know already from verse 2. So here's a trivia question, by the way. Who was the first ever high priest? Who was the first ever high priest? Okay, it's a trick question. So the answer is Moses. Because Aaron couldn't be the high priest until he was ordained, and you needed someone to ordain him. And God picked Moses. So God said to Moses, you're going to be the high priest temporarily until you ordain your brother. Once you ordain your brother, you're not the high priest anymore. And so once Aaron becomes high priest, and then Aaron's the high priest. Okay, so in verse 2 already, Moses called to Aaron and his sons and to the elders of Israel. Now here's something very interesting. I briefly mentioned this last night. When the rabbis point out, when God says to Moses, I'm losing my mind. When the Torah says Aaron and his sons, up until this point in the Torah, it means his two sons, Nadav and Avihu. Okay, that's obvious. But it only means Nadav and Avihu. Why is that not obvious? Because he has two other sons. Elazar and Itamar, they're the younger ones. They're 3 and 4. But it only means, up until this point, Nadav and Avihu. The older two sons had this special blessing. And we see this a couple of times. When Aaron approached, how do we know this? Because earlier in the Torah it says when God called to Aaron and his sons to go to the mountain, we see that only Nadav and Avihu were with him. But it said, and his sons. And we see that the other two sons, Elazar and Itamar, aren't there. Now, how did I know about Itamar? I had a friend, when I was in Fort Myers, I was friends with this evangelical pastor. And he had a friend who was a mayor coming from a town in Israel. So he said, I've got a mayor coming from a town in Israel. Do you want to come to my church and meet him? Sure. So, maybe Jerusalem, Haifa, whatever. So this guy comes. He's the mayor of Itamar, which is like being the mayor of, any of you ever been to the West Coast, like near where I used to live, Sanibel and Captiva? So if you've been to Sanibel and Captiva, there's a strip of land in between Sanibel and Captiva called Santiva. It's about as big as this room, Santiva. So to be the mayor of Itamar is a little bit like being in charge of Santiva. It's a hardcore settler group of very few people. I mean, there may be more people now, but in the beginning, anyway, this guy, he came. But the place is called Itamar. Why is it called Itamar? Because Itamar, Aaron's son, is buried there. Just So that's about the only cool thing about living there. The rest of it is, it's a pretty dangerous spot. It's right next to Nablus, and it's a very, very rough place to live. In any event, Aaron now is going, we learn from verse 2, Moses called Aaron and his sons, and he says to Aaron, verse 2, he says specifically to Aaron, go do these sacrifices. So we know that Aaron's about to go do these sacrifices. Then you get to verse 6, Moses says, this is the thing that God has commanded you to do. The glory of God will appear to you. Okay, now that's a lot to ask. Because you're going to now go over here by the altar, you got these animals, you're going to sacrifice them, and then the glory of God is going to appear to you. So you could ask the question, what if it doesn't? How will I look then? Okay, so we think maybe that Aaron is concerned about this because of verse 7. Even though Aaron's been told a few times to go do this, in verse 7, Moses comes again and says to Aaron, come do it already. What's the holdup? Okay. Now, if you look what Rashi says on this, by the way, who else in the Tanakh was told, perhaps it's for this reason that you're here? Esther, right? This is the reason, you think you won the beauty contest for no reason? Go talk to Achashverosh. And Mordechai literally says to her, this is the reason that you're here. Go do it. Okay, so the same things it's the same thing that Mordechai says to Esther that Moses says to Aaron in verse 6. This is the thing that you're commanded to do. That's why you're here. Now, Aaron, it appears, may be a little nervous about it because Moses has to tell him so many times. And if you look at Rashi on verse 7, the first source, it says, and Moses said to Aaron, go to the altar. Rashi says, for Aaron was embarrassed and feared to go there. So that's why Moses said, wherefore art thou diffident? For this purpose hast thou been selected. And now why would Aaron be embarrassed? Ah, very interesting. He's always been number 2. Interesting idea. I didn't think of that. I like that. Other ideas? The golden calf. He's not sure if he's been forgiven. And maybe even if he has been forgiven, he says, really, am I the guy you want? The last time I stood before God, it didn't work so well. So you think I'm the guy? Okay. Now, I just want to skip a little bit. If we could just skip some of the diaphragm and protuberances for a moment, and the fats and so forth. Yeah, Jay? Can you take a mic so they can hear you at home? Here. Come on.
I guess I'm a little confused by that because it seems to me that Aaron knew he was going to be the high priest. This is not something that he should have been surprised about. So why would he now have felt that way and been embarrassed?
Well, he knew that he was going to be the high priest already from a long time ago, before the golden calf. And we know that because he was rewarded after the selection of Moses, which was, the beginning of Exodus. And in between the time that he found out he was going to be the high priest, and now, the golden calf thing happened. And so maybe he wonders, am I still worthy? I think. But you have to think that the incident of the golden calf so traumatized him that it never left him. And we carry around baggage. We have things that traumatize us, and even though once we've gotten over it, it's still there. We still carry it. And the question is, in what form do we carry it? So, one of the things I often tell people when they lose someone close to them is you say, it doesn't get easier, I don't think, but it gets different. Time does things to it, and how your experiences in life following the loss do things to it. It's still, you still carry around the pain, but it changes, it moves around. And so I don't know exactly where it was for Aaron at the moment, but Rashi believes, picking up on the Midrash, that he still has some issues. And the reason that the rabbis pick up on that is because Moses has to tell him so many times, this is the reason that you were chosen, trying to give him a pep talk saying, yes, you still got it. So. Ooh. Oh, yeah, Farber. All right, Mark, we're trying. Shkoyach.
I see a parallel between Moses and Aaron because when Moses was chosen by God, he was like, me, why me? You got to have somebody else, right? You're not picking me. And Aaron, for whatever his own reasons were, according to Rashi, are you sure? I don't know if I'm up to this task.
Beautiful, beautiful. And we see this with Jacob also. Jacob once says, when he's running away from Esau, he says, God says, I'm going to bless you. And then later on, Jacob says, if you will bless me, then I will, worship you and offer sacrifices to you. So the rabbis say, why would Jacob say, if you're going to bless me? God already promised that. And the answer is that Jacob worried that maybe he committed a sin and he lost the blessing. He never did. But he was worried about that maybe he did.
We're not there yet, I don't think, but compare to me between Moses and Aaron and their humility and being brothers, and then the fast forward to Nadab and Abihu, brothers, where's their humility? They were given the example.
Who, Nadav and Abihu?
Yeah, that brothers.
Okay, so that's a very complicated question. I spoke about it last night, actually, but that's a whole nother class because, I don't know that they weren't humble, based on what the rabbis say, but it's a lot of information there. We can do that next year, maybe. You can pass the mic.
But maybe in Aaron's case, it wasn't humility at all, it was shame.
In Aaron's mind, right. In Aaron's mind. Oh, I see Farber's texting me, too. Okay. Okay. He's a funny guy. All right.
Just one real quick point. The calf is not the largest of the animals that has to be sacrificed. And it seems to me that possibly by mentioning the calf first, that's a little dig to Aaron about what happened with the calf.
Well, yes.
Because you don't get to later on, you get to an ox, which is much larger than a calf.
100%. So the fact that he's being told to bring the egel right away, to bring the calf right away, also reminds him, by the way, you've got some expiation to do. Very good. Okay, so let's go to Edith. Can you take us to the beginning of chapter 10? Well, actually, before we do that, if you look with me at verse 22, chapter 9 still, verse 22. So Aaron raised his hands towards the people and blessed them. And he descended from having performed the sin offering, the Ola offering, and the peace offering. And the rabbis will tell you, including Rashi, that the blessing that he did here, this thing, the Star Trek, Yivarechecha, this is the first time that's done. That's the blessing. This is the priestly benediction. Okay? So he does that. And then verse 23, Moses and Aaron came to the tent of meeting, and they went out and they blessed the people, and the glory of God appeared to the entire people. So the glory of God was, in the first temple, in the first holy temple in Jerusalem, they had the altar. And when they put the animal on top of the altar, they made a fire. But a fire also descended from heaven right down onto the altar and burned if you're ever in the Cardo, in Jerusalem and you're looking for art and you buy a painting, sometimes they have these paintings, you can see the fire coming down from the altar. Those aren't actual photos of what happened. They're just paintings. We don't have any, all the photos we have are too grainy to really make out the fire. But in the second holy temple, the tradition was, because the first holy temple was holier, and once it was destroyed, it lost some of its holiness. In the second holy temple, that fire didn't come down. They burned it themselves. But in the wilderness, when they offered an animal, a fire came down from heaven. So to inaugurate it meant the first time they're going to say, all right, we've got this altar, we're going to put the animal on top, we're going to burn it, and then we're going to hope that the fire descends from heaven, and that's the glory of God, and that's what we're waiting to see. And if that doesn't happen, then this didn't work. Now, Aaron, to the final moment, doesn't believe that he can do it. How do I know that? Look at verse 22. Aaron raised his hands towards the people, and he blessed them, and he made all the offerings. But then he said, you know what? I don't know if I can do this on my own. Because after he does the blessing and he's supposed to do everything, look who comes with him to the tent of meeting. Moses shows up in verse 23. And Aaron came to the tent of meeting, and then they went to bless the people again. Because Aaron says, I just blessed you all, but I don't know if it's going to work, so I'm going to bring Moses again. I'm going to do the blessing with him. And then after Moses offers the blessing with Aaron, the glory of God appeared to the entire people. So look now, Rashi, on that verse. Edith, would you mind reading the long Rashi in the middle of the page? Wherefore did Moses enter? So Rashi's asking the question, well, wait a minute, when did Moses get there?
Wherefore did Moses enter with Aaron? To instruct him regarding the incense ceremony. Or it may be that he entered for some other reason. See, I draw a conclusion. The descent from the altar and the entry into the tent of meeting, both required to be accompanied by a benediction, as stated in verses 22 and 23, and consequently both were in a measure of similar character. Now, what was the descent from the altar? It was of the nature. It looked place in connection with a sacrificial act. So also the entry into the tent took place in connection with a sacrificial act. Thus you may learn, why did Moses enter with Aaron? To instruct him regarding the incense ceremony, which was the only rite performed on that day within the tent.
Okay, so you could say there was one other thing that you had to do whenever and this is true for any sacrifice, whenever they put the sacrifice in the altar, then the priest was supposed to come and put incense on it so that when it went up to God as this offering that rises, it smelled nice. Okay, fine. So Moses says, God told me about this thing with the incense, and I haven't told Aaron yet, and before he goes in and does this, I need to go and tell him about it. Okay, that's Rashi's first opinion, and it could be correct, because Rashi's trying to deal with, wait a minute, why is Moses there? He's not supposed to be there. He's not the high priest. Oh, well, he forgot to tell him something. So now Rashi's going to say another explanation. Whenever Rashi says another explanation, it means what I give you so far isn't enough. And what he's saying by that is, so here's what you have to understand about Rashi. Rashi's never, ever writing his own words. All he does is copy and paste. There are 4 times in the whole Torah he says, here's my idea. But every time, all he's doing is copying, pasting, either from the Talmud or the Midrash. And he's saying, here's what the rabbi said about... Now, for any verse, if you go to the Midrash, there's 10 or 11 opinions. He picks one and says, this is the right one. That's his bias. That's where you get his bias. That's his, the genius of Rashi. Take it or leave it. But he says, you need to focus on this one. But sometimes he says, there's 10 or 11 of them. And to really understand it, you need this one, but you also need this one to understand that one. So he says, okay, look, it's the incense. But if you really want to understand why with the incense, you need this one too. So now we get to another explanation. Okay, so let's see what he says. Edith?
When Aaron perceived that all the sacrifices had been offered and all the rites performed, and yet the Shekinah had not descended for Israel, since the heavenly fire had not fallen to consume the sacrifice, he was uneasy in mind and said, I feel certain that the Holy One, blessed be he, is angry with me, and that it is on my account that the Shekinah has not descended for Israel.
Okay, he didn't have in that moment where he was waiting to see what happened, he lost confidence in himself. Now, does this remind you about the incident of the golden calf in any way? The people were waiting for Moses to come down, and right before he came down, they lost confidence that he was going to come down. So there's some similarities here. You can take it or leave it. That's just my idea, but... Okay. Okay, Edith, let's finish it off.
He therefore said to Moses, My brother Moses, do you act thus with me? You know that I have entered into this matter at your bidding, and yet I have been put to shame. Moses at once entered the tent with him, and they offered prayer, and the Shekinah descended for Israel.
So I don't know from this if the fire would have come down anyway for just Aaron. I suspect it would have. The only thing I know from this is that Aaron had shame. And he felt uncomfortable and didn't have confidence because he was involved with the golden calf. And he had shame. And from that, I know that the Torah knows that there is something called shame, and that you could be embarrassed, and you could commit an act of some sort and be forgiven for it, but still feel bad about it. Right? I could steal $10 from you. I could give you the money back. I could apologize to you. You could forgive me. I could then go and ask God to forgive me for committing that sin. God could forgive me. I could cry my heart out on Yom Kippur and walk out there and I'm totally forgiven and still feel bad about it. That could happen. Right? So what we learn from this is even when we're forgiven for our sins, it doesn't necessarily mean we've come to terms with ourselves. Which is like an interesting idea. Now, where is shame invented? You could say in human history, but let's just say in the Torah. Okay, so I don't know if you looked ahead or not. Don't all cheat like Ken does, but Ken's been waiting all week to tell me what we were going to do. All right, so can I just show you a couple of verses from Genesis at the bottom of the page? Genesis 2:25 says, the two of them were naked, the human and his wife, right? Adam and Eve, yet they felt no shame. Okay, so in the beginning, chapter 2, the end of chapter 2 of Genesis, there were no such thing as clothes, but nobody knew that. They were walking around naked, and it didn't occur to them to be embarrassed because there was no such thing as shame. Until when?
Snake.
Right, and they ate from the fruit. Once they ate from the fruit, what's the next thing they do? They make clothes. Right. But before they ate from the fruit, they weren't embarrassed. Then they ate from the fruit, and the world changed, and all of these negative type emotions and feelings come into the world. And one of them is, or two of them are shame / embarrassment, which they now feel, right? If you look at the next one, Genesis 3:10, he replied, I heard the sound of you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid. Well, before they ate from the fruit, he wouldn't have had this emotion. And then back one more, Genesis 2, on the next page, Genesis 2, verse 9. And from the ground, God caused to grow every tree that was pleasing to the sight and good for food, with the tree in the middle of the garden and the tree of knowledge of good and bad. Okay, so we'll get to that in a moment. So we're not really today dealing so much with Nadav and Avihu. We're dealing only with Aaron. Okay, now Nadav and Avihu are going to come and they're going to offer this alien fire, and they're going to die. Last night I talked about, there are a lot of different opinions about this. One opinion is they were drunk, and they entered into the holy area, the holy, sanctuary to do the work of the high priests in a drunk way, and that's why they're killed. Another opinion is that no, they were haughty and they offered opinions of law in the presence of Moses and Aaron, which you're not supposed to do, and so forth. The rabbis talk about a variety of different sins that maybe is what caused them to do this. We have to understand, though, that later on, God is going to come to Aaron and say, like 9 verses later, after they die, you're not allowed to go in here intoxicated. Which leads one of the rabbis, I think Rabbi Elazar, to say, that must have been what Nadav and Avihu did wrong. They were intoxicated, because otherwise, why would you say this? But but there's a lot more to it. There always is. So, why would Aaron need to know that? Because he now has the next 2 sons who are up, Elazar and Itamar. And they're going to go in now and do the sacrifices. And by the way, they do go in and they do it right and it works. And so what Aaron is seeing is, okay, it didn't work the first time, but I need to make sure it works the second time. And what that's telling Aaron is, your sons are still the guys. You're still the father of this holy thing, and the mission of your life is still going to continue. And that's, I think in a lot of ways, that's the goal in life, is to have a mission, and then to have people who come after you who want to continue that mission. There's nothing worse, right, than, having a mission, and it's a just and rewarding mission, and then you pass away and no one else cares about it and it dies off. Something funny. When I was in Israel, there were a group of like 100 of us on 2 different buses. And the 5 of us, me and Sharon and Rabbi Klepi and Tamara and Nora, we were on a bus, and there were 45 other people from around the country who were there to volunteer. And those other 45 were not familiar with my sense of humor. No. So someone was saying something, and he said, this guy who was sitting across from, I think the guy from Sarasota, he was sitting across from the bus, across the aisle on the bus from me. And someone said something terrible, and he said, those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. What so profound, right? I mean, we say it's like, it's the equivalent of Kol Yisrael Aravim Zeh Bazeh. It's like, if you don't know what else to say, that you say that. So I looked at him and I said, well, what if it was a good thing? What if it was a good thing? And you forget about it. You don't repeat it, I did the hefech, the other will say it doesn't work. And, so he said, if there's a bad thing and you forget about it, it's going to happen again. So I said, well, does that mean if there's a good thing and you forget about it, it won't, it's not going to happen again? And he just looked at me like, I don't think you get it. So I don't know. I thought it was really funny. Yeah.
What was the historical thing he was referring to? Why did he say that? Because I can think, and I don't.
Oh, I don't remember. I just thought it was funny because I said, well, what if it's a good thing and you want it to repeat again?
No, right. No, and that was a great response. But I wonder, just backing up,
Yeah.
what was he referring to?
Oh, I can't
in
remember.
history?
Yeah, I can't remember. I don't know. We were talking about something bad that happened. Who knows? I honestly can't remember. The only thing I remember was his reaction of just, what kind of nonsense am I dealing with here? Like, I thought you said you were a rabbi, and I was like, it takes a while. It takes a while. So, all right. So, back to Genesis 2:9. And from the ground God caused to grow every tree that was pleasing to the sight and good for food, with the tree of life in the middle of the garden and the tree of knowledge of good and bad. So Nachmanides has a comment there that I just wanted to share with you to conclude here. So he says, now at the time, so sexual intercourse between Adam and his wife was not a matter of desire. Instead, at the time of begetting offspring, they came together and propagated. In other words, to have relations between Adam and Eve before the fruit was eaten. It was just something that they had this sense that this is something we should do now. That it's the right thing to do, that we're commanded to be fruitful and multiply, and we should just do it. And there's no inner sexual desire or anything. It's what you do. Just like when you get hungry, you eat. How do you know you want to eat? Because you're hungry. If you're not hungry, you don't eat. Sometimes you do, and then whatever. But if you're on a cruise or whatever. But therefore, all the limbs were in their eyes as the face and the hands, and they were not ashamed of them, right? Because it was just so being naked didn't occur to them because those things, it's not something they thought about. But after they ate of the fruit of the tree of knowledge, he possessed the power of choice. He could now willingly do evil or good to himself or to others. This, on the one hand, is a godlike attribute. But as far as man is concerned, it is bad because through it he has a will and a desire. It is possible that Scripture intended to allude to this matter when it said that God made man upright, but they had sought out many inventions. The uprightness is that man should keep to one right path, and the seeking out of many inventions is man's search for deeds which change according to his choice. Good. I don't know that we understand any of that. Maybe we do, maybe we don't. But here's what I think it means. We come to now the story of Aaron, who he didn't really even do anything wrong. And the reason that I think that is because when Moses comes down and says to Aaron, "What did you do?" And Aaron explains to him what he did, Moses says, "I get it. You had to." Miriam's son tried to stop them from doing this, Hur, and they killed him. Right? And Aaron said, "They would have killed me too." And one of my favorite views on this that I learned from my professor in rabbinic school, Dr. Cohen, who's been here a few times, he argues that if Aaron hadn't made the golden calf and the people saw that Moses wasn't coming down, they might have given up and just left. Then just said, there's nothing happening here. This mountain's not that great. Nothing's going on here. He's not coming back. That guy's dead. This is over. We're leaving. So Aaron had to do something to keep them there until Moses would come down with the Ten Commandments, and they could see that something was going on. That's just one idea. You can take it or leave it, but I always thought it was compelling. That Aaron had to do something to keep them engaged. Right? So what I think it's saying is, this is a very profound concept. It may be too profound even for us to understand, but let me try. Aaron did something wrong that he didn't intend to do. And it made him feel bad, even though it wasn't his fault. And to a certain extent, Adam and Eve, they ate the fruit. But at the time that they ate the fruit, they didn't know what was going to happen. Eve said, an apple a day. Not that we think it's an apple, I don't know. But, it's healthy. You've been eating a lot of carbs, try a piece of, whatever. But then the world changed, and the way they now looked at the world changed. And previously, Adam would look at Eve naked and not think anything. And now he looks at her naked and thinks, boy, I want to have sex. It changed the way we look at the world. And so now Aaron, and it brings shame into the world and a lot of other emotions. But we're just focusing today on shame. So Aaron now has shame for something that he didn't even really do wrong. And what does that tell us about our world? And this is what Nachmanides is trying to say. So let me just read it again and maybe try to explain it one last time, for the first time. So he said, maybe like almost halfway up, the end of the line, it says, it is possible that, you see that? It is possible that Scripture intended to allude to this matter when it said that God made man upright. In other words, God made us perfect, but then they had this sin, and now all these imperfections come into the world. And we've sought out many inventions, which means that, lusting after, sexual desires didn't exist. And then Adam sees Eve, and now that exists. But think of all the different ways, the myriad of ways, the infinite ways lust has come into our world ever since then. Right? All of those, every type of way that lust has come into the world since Adam and Eve first saw each other naked, all those different ways are human invention. God didn't invent those. It happened when Adam and Eve, okay, that's where it started. God put that into the world. But everything that's built up on that is what the human mind has built on top of that ever since. And that's just one sin. There are lots of other sins too. Here's the thing. Think about this. Anytime there's like a new law or a regulation, it's because someone's found a new way to cheat you. Think of all the different ways people are out there trying to steal your identity, steal your money, convince you of this, convince you of that. And so you need a new law to say, well, now you can't do that anymore. If I would have told you 60 years ago we need laws against identity theft, you'd say something like, who wants to be me? Yeah. Right? But now it's a thing. And people are trying to scam us in every conceivable way. And once every conceivable way there's a law that says you can't do that, they find a new way. And then they find a new way. And then they find a new way. And the human mind continues to find ways to sin. And Aaron, who didn't maybe not even really sin, is reminding of us that the human mind, ever since Adam and Eve ate from the fruit, the human mind is continuing to come up with new ways to get around or to cheat or to do things they're not supposed to do. And that's shameful. And that he can't bear. And the fact that he was part of that, because let me just end with this. What were they trying to create with the golden calf? They weren't trying to create a replacement for God. They were trying to create a replacement for Moses. So the fact that they learned that there are prophets gave them the idea that we could create our own prophet. And so we're trying to get around this. And Aaron says, I can't believe that I was part of this human, evolution of trying to get away with stuff. I can't believe that I was part of that. So much so that I don't know that if I go in there that this fire is going to come down. Now that's his own humility. Because I believe that the fire would have come down for him. But Moses says, fine, if you really don't think so, I don't want you to feel embarrassed. I'll go in with you and we'll make sure this happens. Fine, and they do. But at the same time, what Aaron brings to mind to us is that our minds, if we don't restrain them, our minds will continue to try to get out of stuff and get away with stuff. I'll give you one example. There's a law in Judaism that says if on Yom Kippur or on any fast day, if you don't want to fast, like if you have a fear that you're going to get sick, you can get like a doctor's note. If your doctor tells you it's not safe for you to fast, it becomes a sin for you to fast. If you go to your doctor and say, listen, here's my condition, you know my condition, you're my doctor, I have this, this, and this, I want to fast, the doctor says, fasting for you is dangerous to your health, you could end up in the hospital, I'm really worried about it, it's now forbidden for you to fast. If you go to the doctor and the doctor says, you know, you're hoping he's going to say that, and he says, no, you're good, you'll be fine. Worst thing that happens, you get a headache, take a couple Advil, you'll be fine. Jewish law is, if you still feel that you're going to get sick, even though the doctor told you you're going to be fine, you're allowed to not fast. Because nobody knows your body better than you. And you can say, I know he says that, and I know on paper, but last year he said the same thing too, and last year I fasted, and I did get sick, and I ended up in whatever. You're okay. So you could technically get out of fasting because you could say, I don't agree with my doctor. And on paper, that's fine. But you're looking for a way to get around something you're not supposed to be doing. And you could do that. And what Aaron's telling you, listen to this. What Aaron's telling you is when you take shortcuts like that, shame on you. Shame on you. That's what shame is. And you can't do that. It's a very powerful message. So, okay. Shabbat shalom.
But it's great to see you, Faye. If you get a chance, it's a long way.
Based on what you shared, I would think that
Very
you had to do this.
Yeah, because
It's not a joke. This is something that runs in your family. Yeah, but I mean, I said, how do you replace an aorta? He said, I get it psychologically. Yeah, you got it. So, I understand. Regardless, you hear that, you kind of preach at them. No, they went through the side. Well, at least from what I was told, the original procedure was from the side. And he's developed this. He's supposed to be pretty good. Well, freedom comes for me 6 tomorrow morning. Kids head back. I love it when they're here. I love them, but it's a thing. A lot of food, a lot of garbage. Week today. I would love to. Well, I gotta go visit Mr. Reynolds. Hey, I gotta see you. It's my Right. This is what I see in the morning with Zoe. I go downstairs, they don't budge. Neither of them moving. Not even thinking about that. No, she comes right next to us in her own bed. Wrapped all over. I see that. I love it.
Right, exactly.
Well, Zoe made it to the bed this week because of the thunder. You know, when the thunder comes, we bring her up. So Richard went to visit because he needed some legal help. And then he called me because he needed some insurance advice. So I think he's on. He's going to do it. He is having dinner.
We are having dinner.
All right, let's go. I got things to do.
Yeah.
Or we just do nothing to
Right,
he
right.
didn't do that, versus if he was trying to really make a substitute for Moses and he believed it and whatever, and then he was so ashamed. Because it's all about the intent. The intent to this day in people stays buried in one's heart.
Ah, very nice.
Even in the court. In the court. Well, the intent. You have to prove intent.
Yeah.
It's hard to prove intent.
Exactly.
You
Yeah.
know, so we don't know
Motive, right?
intent.
I like it. Yeah, I like it. You know, that unfortunately, the Torah is so succinct. You know, everything we're talking about is us trying to read between the lines. Like every conversation is only 2 lines. They're like, really? That's all they said? They're together in the wilderness for 40 years. It's just one line conversation. Every conversation is only 1 line. We only get the headlines. We don't never get the article.
The whole thing.
So,
To even try to see what was
and that's what the Midrash tries to do, is to fill in the blanks.
right.
But it's just an attempt. We don't know for sure.
Why wouldn't they open it up so Midrash
Okay.
could be Midrash
Yeah,
could be I'll just be a second, 1 second. That Midrash could be continued with modern rabbis. Like Midrash too.
It is.
There is
The rabbis are offering new
ongoing
stuff all the
Midrash.
time. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Rabbis are writing stuff all the time.
Good.
So,
Glad to
yeah.
know. All right. Welcome back.
That's why, like, the thing I said about Dr. Cohen, his idea that he was, hang on 1 sec, that he's just trying to leave him, that's an idea. He's a contemporary rabbi.
Okay. All right.
So yeah, so we're constantly trying. Rabbi John, I'm going to talk today in the conservative meeting about an idea from Jonathan Sachs. You know, contemporary. Well, he just passed away, but contemporary rabbi. Yeah.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
What's happening?
We had a caucus of 2 legislators from Tallahassee,
Okay.
the House of Representatives. One was Vicky Lopez, who covers a lot of this.
Yeah, I know.
And the other was Jennifer Kennedy. He's going to be the Speaker of the House. And they were Republicans, and it's amazing how committed they were, and I think they were committed to Israel and fighting against anti-Semitism. You listen to them, and they talk, I believe, in
Right.
parts. But then I got up there and said, sure, I said, it's hard to cross the bridge without understanding the things.
No, seguro no voy a poner el micrófono. support Israel as if there's no other stuff, and then we support the other stuff as if there's no Israel.
And today we're caught in the middle.
We're caught in the
I've
middle.
never seen it so bad.
That's why I say I'm an independent, because
It's easier to be an independent. If it's hard, it's so.
well, the Democrats,
You have to bring our party back.
look, I'm happy with Biden. The Democrats.
It's true about both parties.
Huh?
It's true about both parties.
The reality is, even the worst of both parties, except for the squad on the left and the ultra-conservative, neo-Nazis.
Yeah, you're the white nationalist.
What president hasn't supported Israel, except for maybe Carter?
Say again?
What president has? Obama did support it. You have to remember something. You know where the money came from to fund Iron Dome? Where? Came from a presidential directly from Obama, because he didn't want to go through Congress.
Well, look,
Came from him.
Iran with Obama's a tough thing, but Biden's
He's now torn. He said to himself, I'm not going to get elected unless I find a middle path. Netanyahu makes it very difficult.
my problem with Netanyahu, I have a lot of problems with Netanyahu, but my main problem with Netanyahu vis-a-vis Biden is that Biden is, in my opinion, so pro-Israel that Bibi feels like he can get away with anything.
He's pushing him away.
But to Biden's credit, he's still.
Well, did you see the